Hello everyone, it's Wednesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Escalating tensions on the Korean Peninsula amid diversification and advancement of North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. The reclusive regime launched a solid-fuel ICBM last week and today unveiled its plan to launch the regime's first-ever military reconnaissance satellite within this month. To this, South Korea is taking the most hardline approach, with President Yoon Suk Yeol saying Seoul is developing ultra-high-performance, high-powered weapons to counter North Korea's threats. How are tensions going to develop? For an in-depth analysis, we welcome into the studio Doctor Go Myong-hyun, Senior Fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Go, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And we also have Bruce Klingner, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Mr. Klingner, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, first question to our Mr. Klingner. Now, before we delve deeper into our discussions on ICBMs, why don't we tap on the latest news first? North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Wednesday, that is today, ordered the launch of the regime's first military surveillance satellite as planned for sometime this month. But the regime does go ahead with this. How significant is this surveillance satellite and what can we imply from its launch?
We don't really know how significant it'll be because we don't know the capabilities of the reconnaissance satellite. On the one hand, because they have not had a reconnaissance satellite before, this could significantly improve their ability to target facilities, military and civilian, in South Korea. On the other hand, when they did release sort of test images from their earlier test flight, they were very unimpressive, although North Korea claimed the real satellite would be much more capable. So, they could get a lot of targeting information from commercial satellite imagery like Google Earth, et cetera. And also because South Korea is such an open society, they could have North Korean agents gathering information on targeting from sources within South Korea. So we're not quite sure, but any improvement in their capabilities, whether for targeting or for actual attacks, is certainly worrisome.
Right, I see. So we'll have to wait and see. Now, Dr. Go, let's turn our focus to ICBMs. Now, North Korea claimed Friday that it had successfully test-fired a new type of solid-fuel ICBM, and it reportedly was launched at a high angle. Could you give us some details about this and the reasons behind Pyongyang's such move?
So I would say it wasn't just a simple high-angle launch that we have seen before. It was a modified high-angle, so to speak. So there were two phases to North Korea's most recent ICBM launch. The first phase, including the first stage, at the very beginning of the launch, actually it was launched at the normal angle, which triggered alarm on the Japanese side because clearly the estimated trajectory of the recent launch was towards Japan, especially the island of Hokkaido. And this triggered alarm in the island of Hokkaido because the Japanese government was worried, concerned that this normal angle launch would accidentally take the ICBM descend on the Japanese island. But later on, at the second phase of the launch of the ICBM, it actually modified the angle of ascent. So it became more of a high-angle launch, which essentially diminished the risk of the ICBM falling on the Japanese territory. So, but I think experts believe this was actually intended on the part of North Korea. So we're engaged in this very strange, very obscure strategic signaling by North Korea, where a minute change of angle of launch actually signifies something. So in this case, the purported message on the North Korea seems to have been that this is the first hint that the next round of ICBM launch would involve a normal trajectory, normal angular launch, which would demonstrate the full capability of the ICBM that North Korea has developed by showing the normal maximum range of their the ICBM. So this could be much more threatening in terms of the optics as well as the significance, and as well as affecting the international opinion about the threat that North Korea's ICBM capability represents.
Right, I see. Now, Mr. Klingner, on Saturday to this, Voice of America cited a missile expert who said that the Hwasang-18 is very similar to a Russian ICBM, hinting at the possibility of cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow, or the regime tracking back Russian-made systems to help out with the development. Is it really similar to Russia's? And is there any possibility of Moscow helping North Korea out with the development? I mean, what are the implications of such an assessment?
I don't think Russia is assisting North Korea. The early parts of the North Korean missile program decades ago, they had acquired some Russian missiles and then they would reverse engineer them for either just producing the same type of missile, or the North Korean scientists would figure out ways to extend the range or the capability of the missile. But it has been an indigenous nuclear program and an indigenous missile program. It gets some assistance or components from the outside world, but it's not a case of either Russia or China assisting it. So I think it may have been more of a description that this new solid fuel missile is similar to a Russian missile, but not insinuating that Russia was actually providing direct assistance to North Korea.
Right, I see. Now, Dr. Go, according to updated version of Congressional Research Service's report, it says the reliability of such solid fuel ICBM without further testing has been cast into doubt. And on the other hand, the commander of the U.S. Forces Korea, he spoke of concerns that the regime is capable of striking Washington, D.C. and beyond, and adding that such ICBM tests do influence the U.S.'s so-called indications and warning systems. How is Washington viewing this solid fuel ICBM?
So I think, objectively speaking, North Korea is in the process of perfecting their ballistic missile capability. So North Korea has uniquely has shown a track record of deploying yet to be completed or fully developed missile systems. We have seen that with the case of the Musudan intermediate range ballistic missile, which was first deployed, but then in the testing process, so they reversed the order of deployment. So they deployed the missile first, then they kept testing it to perfect the system, and they kept failing with the system. And then they have the similar thing with the other short range and intermediate range, as well as the intercontinental range ballistic missiles. So clearly, North Korea has shown patterns of completing their weapon system while the system was actually deployed operationally. So this is exactly the fact that the Congressional Research Service is pointing out. But this is an objective assessment. But on the part of the security and military planners, they take this very conservative approach. So they always assume the worst-case scenario. So even if North Korea has kind of half-baked ballistic missile systems, it doesn't mean that the North Korea is unable or incapable of causing damage or substantial damage to the United States or the allies. So let's say that North Korea launches 10 missiles, even if 8 fail at launch, if only 2 of them end up in the U.S. territory, it's likely that it's going to lead to very significant damages. So this is exactly what the U.S. FK commander is pointing at. So, so any military planner has to assume really this worst-case scenario, very conservative worst-case scenario approach, and that means that from the United States military planning point of view, the North Korea's ICBM capability is seen as is treated as actual present and imminent threat to the U.S. mainland.
Right, I see. And now I see why they are having quite a slightly different view.
Exactly.
Right. Now, Mr. Klingner, with that concerns in mind, Washington strongly condemned Pyongyang's latest ballistic missile launch and called on the regime to come to the table for serious negotiations through a statement made by NSC spokesperson. However, it does not seem the U.S. is taking quite a tangible action. How is the U.S. viewing these moves by Pyongyang, and what kind of diplomatic strategy is it using?
Washington is very concerned about this latest development with the first successful test of a solid fuel ICBM. As we've been very concerned with all of the many missile developments that North Korea has had in recent years, and also the display of 10 tactical nuclear warheads that Kim Jong-un showed some days ago. So it's all very worrisome. But Washington, like Seoul and Tokyo, have repeatedly tried to have discussions, let alone formal negotiations with North Korea. But Pyongyang has been rejecting all attempts at engagement or diplomatic discussion since late 2019, the last time we had bilateral talks with North Korea. So the U.S. is trying to have dialogue, as our allies are trying, but North Korea rejects that. They also are refusing even to pick up the phone of the inter-Korean hotline at Panmunjom. So in the meantime, the U.S., in conjunction with its allies, is trying to enhance our deterrence and defense capabilities. We're taking some measures to increase pressure on North Korea, but many things we're not doing. And we're also working with other nations. Like we just saw the G7 meeting where they condemned North Korea's missile launch and called on Pyongyang to come back to discussions. But so far, all for naught on the diplomatic side.
Right, I see. Now, Dr. Go, another UNSC meeting was hosted actually over North Korea's recent provocation, but finished without a fruitful outcome due to continued opposition from China and Russia, as we all know. In your opinion, how effective is this UNSC meeting, and what is China and Russia's stance regarding this issue?
Clearly, the United Nations Security Council has remained dysfunctional in terms of enforcing sanctions as well as responding to North Korea's advancements in nuclear and missile capabilities. And then I think going into this phase of North Korean provocations, now the expectation of the international community regarding the effectiveness of the United Nations Security Council has been adjusted downward. So there was no much expectation of the UNSC taking any action against North Korea, fresh round of North Korean provocations. And but we all know the reason, and this is because of the veto power of China and Russia, which remain very friendly with North Korea. But then the biggest stumbling block is clearly Russia. Russia, because of the ongoing war in Ukraine, has become a major rogue state in terms of not cooperating with the international community in enforcing not just about North Korea, but also other norms and other obligations that Russia has as a major power, as well as the permanent member of the Security Council. So as long as the Ukraine war goes on, it's unlikely that Russia is going to cooperate with the international community. China is also, in a way, in a similar position. I think that China is probably has readjusted its red line provocation that could precipitate an action by China against North Korea, and chances that that's the nuclear test by North Korea. And well, even though we have to see whether China will take action, even if North Korea carries out the nuclear test. So clearly they have a very different opinion of North Korea's recent provocations. And I think this is the reason why North Korea is taking advantage of this distraction at the Security Council level to advance very rapidly their missile provocations. And that's the reason why we are seeing so many rounds of missile tests by North Korea.
Right, I see. It's using this period of time as an opportunity.
Exactly.
Right. Now, Dr. Go, one more question. To deal with such increasing North Korean provocations, South Korea is tightening three-way security cooperation with Washington and Tokyo. And they actually kicked off a trilateral missile defense exercise in the East Sea on Monday. Could you tell us what this is mainly about and what significance this has?
So I think it's mainly about the information sharing. So I mean, respectively, each one of these countries count with quite significant missile defense capabilities. What would make them more powerful is the synergetic cooperation among the three countries in terms of information sharing, especially the real-time information sharing. So it means that each pair of eyes, the so-called sensors or radars, that these countries have as part of their missile defense system, the information from these sensors will be combined, which is going to really increase the detectability and response time against any missile launch by North Korea. So I think this follows up the normalization of the GSOMIA, the intelligence sharing agreement between Korea and Japan. So this is one of the positive outcomes of the improvement in the Korea-Japan relations. And I think we're going to continue to see more deterrence posture, enhanced deterrence posture by the three countries, which is exactly what the international community and the security experts in three countries that we're talking about have been asking and expecting.
Right. Now, Mr. Klingner, not just that, during defense trilateral talks, South Korea, U.S., and Japan agreed on Friday to hold missile defense and anti-submarine exercises more regularly. How do you see this boost in trilateral cooperation shaping tensions on the peninsula?
Well, it's a very positive development. For a number of years, we had canceled large-scale military exercises. President Trump unilaterally decided to do that in 2018, as well as canceling the rotational deployment of U.S. strategic or nuclear-capable assets. So when we did that, we didn't get anything in return from North Korea, neither diplomatic response or reduction of their own military exercises. So late last year, the U.S. and South Korea and Japan all agreed to resume these exercises. And so it's repairing some of the degradation in our capabilities of the last several years. So it's also very positive in that now we have a resumption of trilateral exercises. And with President Yoon's very bold, even politically risky initiative to improve relations with Japan, we've seen really a large number of meetings on economic, diplomatic, and military amongst the two countries or amongst the three with the United States. So, and then last year, the three leaders agreed to exchange information on North Korean missiles in real time, which is another step up in coordination. So we'll have to see how that is implemented. But right now, it's a very positive upward trend in security cooperation amongst the three countries, and I certainly hope that that continues.
Right. Dr. Go, shifting gears a little bit here to focus on South Korea's response. South Korea recently issued its annual unification white paper and used the term the denuclearization of North Korea instead of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula in an apparent bid to show and clarify that the North Korea is the one that needs to give up its nuclear programs. Now, what were other details included in this white paper, and what implication does this white paper have?
So clearly, I think the clarification of the denuclearization that we've been discussing with North Korea, it's very helpful. I think the term denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula has been very confusing, especially for those who are outside the Korean Peninsula, and then they take up this issue for the first time. That such a phrase implies that South Korea actually is armed with nuclear weapons, whereas it's not. South Korea has been abiding by the joint declaration between the two Koreas regarding the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. So it's North Korea that has not abided by the agreement. So in that sense, I think this is a very important step, but a very necessary and overdue step in clarifying the nature of the nuclear crisis that we are having in the Korean Peninsula. So this is very helpful. And secondly, I think the new white paper uses the term provocation to characterize North Korean actions. This is long overdue as well. This is especially necessary because there's no other way to characterize North Korea's recent round of actions, missile tests, and then passing the new law, the nuclear law that goes against the nuclear norm of not using nuclear weapons for offensive purposes. All these actions characterize North Korea as a major international security threat. And then therefore, it's only logical for South Korea to characterize North Korean actions as provocations against the peace and stability of in the world. So there's that issue. And also, the white paper takes up the very important issue of the human rights situation in North Korea. We know that the North Korean human rights situation got worse, which is unbelievable, from a very bad baseline situation to a worse situation because the North Korean regime is increasing its control over the society, especially going after the influence of external information such as South Korean drama and cultural products, punishing people with public executions and so forth for just mere possession of such products. So in that sense, I think it really actualizes and describes them in an accurate manner what's going on in terms of human rights violation in North Korea, as well as North Korean actions that threatens the international peace and stability.
Right, I see. Now, Mr. Klingner, during an interview with Reuters today, President Yoon Suk Yeol said Seoul is developing ultra-high performance, high-powered weapons to counter North Korea's threats, adding that he has no plan to hold a summit just to show off to domestic voters, but is open to the dialogue. How do you see tension ratcheting up on the peninsula?
Tensions on the peninsula seem to go in cycles. They seem to go up and down at the whim of North Korea. So, North Korea would like the U.S. and its allies to stop the resumption of military exercises. They liked it when we were degrading our military capabilities, but we can't do that. So, President Yoon has quite correctly, agreed to resume these exercises with the U.S. and Japan, as well as a resumption of South Korean military exercises, and he's strengthening the three-axis defense system of South Korea. So I think he's doing all the right steps of taking measures to enhance the security of South Korea as well as of its citizens. So he, like the other nations, are trying to have diplomacy with North Korea. But I know President Biden and President Yoon and Prime Minister Kishida have all said they're not just going to have some, camera-ready summit just for political benefits without having some kind of diplomatic progress at the working level ahead of time. So I think also that's the right step. We need to have conditional summits based on progress towards an actual denuclearization agreement rather than just a photo op.
Right, I see. I'd like to ask more questions to our experts, but unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Dr. Go and Mr. Klingner, for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us again.
This is all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.